Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. Let me tell you about the exact moment I watched the woman who ruined me drop to her knees, sobbing, as if her bones just gave out under the weight of 2 words I whispered. 2 words. That's all I said. And no, this isn't one of those I got rich and she begged me back stories. I didn't win the lottery, I didn't glow up, I didn't post some slick revenge selfie. I just survived. Barely. When I saw her again after all those years, standing under the harsh lights of that art exhibit, hair shorter, lips painted too dark, fake confidence, I knew she recognized me before her brain admitted it. She blinked 3 times. Her wine glass tilted. And then she asked it, "How'd you survive?" But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind to the moment I vanished, not when I decided to leave. That came earlier. The decision was quiet, like a breath before a scream. No note, no bags. Just silence and a hotel key card tossed in the trash outside a gas station. You see, the night she did it, the public prank that stripped me bare in front of everyone, I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't even go home. I became invisible. She called it a light-hearted roast. That's how she excused it to the crowd. My family laughed. Her co-workers recorded it. And I stood there, center stage, in a dollar store crown she slapped on my head, while they read fake diary entries she wrote in my name. Pages of mockery. Today I almost made a decision, but got scared and went back to bed. My dreams include organizing cables and not disappointing my cats. They laughed. I smiled. And then I walked off that stage like I was heading to the bathroom. But I never came back. She reported me missing 4 days later. For the first time in her life, Dana didn't have the punchline. The train ride out of the city that night didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a funeral. I stared at my own reflection in the darkened window, trying to understand how someone so invisible could still feel so exposed. I didn't cry. I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow. I left behind everything without a plan. The apartment, the job, the people who clapped when I was turned into a living joke. The only thing I took with me was the coat she once bought me on clearance and a small USB drive I always kept on my keychain, filled with unfinished short stories, old photos, and one video I never meant to keep. For months, I drifted. Cheap motels, temporary jobs, borrowed names. I became a master of small exits. Leave before people get curious, blend in, keep your head down. I didn't speak to anyone unless I had to. I didn't exist online. No social media. No email. I even stopped writing. My voice, on every level, disappeared. But there was one place I kept returning to, a small diner in a town that barely had a name. I found it by accident during a storm when the bus I was on broke down. The owner, an old man named Grant, didn't ask questions. He handed me a towel and pointed to a booth like I was expected. I stayed there 5 hours. Said 3 words total. He never pushed. Just refilled my coffee again and again. That place became my ghost nest. A limbo where no one knew me as the guy from the video. Ah yes, the video. She uploaded it 2 days after the gala. Titled, "My Husband's Roast. He Didn't Know, Faced with Tears of Joy." Over 600K views. People loved it. Said I had great loser energy. Comments like, "He looks like he actually believed she loved him," faced with tears of joy, and "Bro's face at the end is priceless," made my stomach turn. Even after vanishing, I became viral as a meme. I remember the moment I saw it. I was at a library using one of those ancient public computers to check the weather. Someone behind me whispered, "Wait, is that the guy from the prank video?" I didn't turn around. I closed the browser, walked out the front door, and kept walking for almost 10 miles that day. But eventually, the world moved on. The views slowed. The comments faded. And for a while, I believed I could too. Until the email came. I hadn't used that address in nearly a year. I had no idea how she got it. But there it was, sitting unread in the inbox of an account tied to nothing. The subject line was simple: "Lo, I'm sorry. Please." At first, I didn't open it. But curiosity is poison, slow and patient. 3 days later, I clicked. The email had no apology, no explanation, just one sentence. "How'd you survive?" And that's when I knew she hadn't moved on at all. She needed to know. She needed to understand how the man she broke publicly didn't break privately. But she had no idea what I'd become, no idea what I'd lost in silence. And she had no idea what 2 words would do to her when we finally met again. I didn't reply to the email. Not immediately. I stared at that single sentence. How'd you survive? For over an hour. I read it again and again, hoping maybe a second sentence would appear, something that explained it all, something that made it make sense. But it didn't. It sat there in that white digital void like a match waiting for flame. I could have ignored it. I should have. But something inside me cracked open, and not because I missed her, I didn't. What I missed was the version of myself who would have rushed to fix it. The version she killed. That night, I walked 5 blocks to the diner. Grant was closing up, but he left the door unlocked like he always did. I sat in the same booth, still damp from a passing storm, and waited for him to ask me what was wrong. He never did. He poured the coffee, handed me a slice of day-old pie, and walked back behind the counter like he knew I just needed space to bleed in peace. I pulled out my phone. I still had the draft folder from the night I disappeared. There was a message I had typed in the back of a Greyhound bus, still unsent. It said, "You took everything. And I let you. Never again." I didn't send that one either. Instead, I started typing something new. 2 words. That was it. 2 words that hit me out of nowhere, like a whisper that had been echoing for years waiting for me to listen. I didn't send it then, either. I saved it. Held on to it. Like a weapon I wasn't ready to use yet. Weeks passed. I went back to work, under a fake name, in a fake town, where no one cared who I used to be. It was peaceful in that disjointed, fragile way that only broken people understand. But something shifted after the email. I started hearing her voice again, not in a ghostly way, but in those cracks where silence crept in. I'd hear her laughter when a woman nearby chuckled too loudly. I'd flinch at the sound of champagne corks. And I started writing again, not fiction, but truth. I wrote every memory down in a small leather notebook. The night she said she loved how obedient I was. The time she laughed when I cried at her father's funeral. The way she once told a stranger at a party, "He's not my type, but he makes a good placeholder." I had forgotten so many of those moments until I started to write. And suddenly, I couldn't stop remembering. Then came the second email. This one had a photo attached. It was her. Alone. Sitting on a bench I immediately recognized. It was in the sculpture garden outside the museum downtown. She looked different. Not sad. Not joyful. Just hollow. The caption read, "If you still exist, I'll be here Thursday at 5 o'clock. I need to see you." I didn't know what made me more nauseous, that she thought this meeting might somehow repair what she shattered, or that some part of me, the part still clawing for dignity, wanted her to see what she did. Not for revenge. Not for validation. But because some betrayals deserve to echo in the face of their creators. I hadn't spoken a word to her in over 2 years. But Thursday came anyway. I showed up. Not out of curiosity. Not out of hope. I came because this time, I had the punchline. And she wouldn't see it coming. I stood across the street from the museum for nearly 10 minutes before I made myself move. From behind the trees, I could see the bench clearly. She was already there. Same posture as in the photo. Elbows on knees. Phone clutched in her hand like it might anchor her to the earth. There were a few people walking the paths nearby, but they faded into the background. All I could focus on was her. It was strange seeing her like that, not through a screen, not from memory, but in real time, breathing, blinking, older. Her hair was darker now, not dyed, but just duller. The gleam was gone. I didn't expect that to hit me as hard as it did. Not in a longing way, in a realization way. Dana was no longer the storm. She was just a woman waiting to be heard by a man she once publicly dismantled for applause. I crossed the street slowly, hands in my jacket pockets, heart pounding so loud it sounded like footsteps. She didn't see me at first. I approached from the side, staying behind the sculpture until I was just a few feet away. When she finally looked up, the air between us changed. Her face went pale, and her mouth opened slightly like she had rehearsed 1,000 speeches but forgot all of them in an instant. "Lowell?" She said it like a question, like she still couldn't believe I existed outside of the version she buried on stage. I didn't respond. I just sat on the edge of the bench, leaving space between us wide enough to make her uncomfortable, but close enough to make her confront the reality of what she'd done. She started talking almost immediately, apologizing, in pieces, not fluently. "I didn't know. I didn't think it would get so big. I thought you were in on it," she rambled, voice trembling. I watched her like someone might observe a stranger unpacking groceries on a street corner. No recognition. No warmth. Just the surreal feeling of witnessing someone else's regret unravel in real time. She asked me where I'd gone, what I'd done. She said she thought I might have, then stopped herself, eyes filling. I thought maybe something terrible happened to you, she whispered. I laughed. It wasn't cruel. It was tired, deep, the kind of laugh that says you don't know the half of it. Something terrible did happen, I said quietly. You. She flinched like I'd slapped her. That silence that followed. It stretched wide. She wiped her face, nodded like she deserved that. Maybe she did. I don't know anymore. She started explaining the fallout. How her company made her take the video down after someone complained. How she lost some promotions because of the reputation damage. She said she went to therapy. Found God. Lost him. Found him again. Said she couldn't date because no one ever matched up to me. That part made me want to laugh again, but it stuck in my throat like glass. Then she leaned in and asked it again, softer this time, like she was afraid of the answer. How did you survive, Lo? I turned to her slowly, met her eyes, those same eyes that once watched me burn on stage like it was entertainment. And then I said it. The two words I'd been holding like knives, the ones I typed in that diner months ago and memorized like scripture. Without you. And just like that, she broke. Not in a theatrical way. In a real, ugly, human way. Her hands went to her face, and she let out a sound that didn't even feel like crying. It was grief, pure and raw. She folded inward like something inside her just gave out. I stood up without a word, turned, and walked away. No speech. No closure. Just the sound of her sobs fading behind me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. I didn't turn around after I walked away. That was the hardest part. My whole body screamed to look back, to see her reaction one more time, but I didn't. I kept walking like the past wasn't clawing at my back with every step. My legs were shaking, and for a second, I thought they'd give out. Not because I regretted what I said, but because I hadn't realized how much weight I'd been carrying until I finally set it down. Without you. 2 words. That's all it took to shift the balance of everything. Years of humiliation, silence, and isolation all compressed into one quiet exit that she never saw coming. I didn't go back to the town I'd been hiding in. I couldn't. Something had changed. It wasn't revenge. I never wanted that. It was like I'd closed a door that had been left open too long, letting the cold in. And now, with it finally shut, I needed to start over, truly this time. No more ghost towns. No more pretending to be someone else just to feel safe. I booked a room in a city where I knew no one, paid in cash, and started looking for work. Real work. Not under a fake name. Not with my head down. I didn't want to be invisible anymore. I just wanted to be me, whatever was left of that. But peace is strange when you've lived without it for so long. The quiet felt suspicious. Every moment without her voice, without her eyes on me, felt like a trap. I kept waiting for another email, another message, another apology disguised as an explanation. But it didn't come. Days passed. Then a week. I thought maybe she was done. Maybe she understood now. Maybe she was finally going to leave me alone. I was wrong. The letter came on a rainy Tuesday, tucked inside a plain white envelope with no return address. I almost didn't open it. But something about the handwriting stopped me. I recognized the way she formed her R's, looping them like little swans. Inside was a single page. No salutation. No Dear Lowell. Just words, frantic and messy. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought it was love. I thought you were the kind of man who would always be there no matter how hard I pushed. You never raised your voice. You never made me feel small, and I didn't know what to do with that. I thought making people laugh was how I showed affection. I know now it was cruelty dressed in glitter. I see you everywhere. In the mirror. In empty rooms. I hear you in songs I used to mock you for liking. Please don't disappear again. I couldn't take it. Not again. There was no signature. No phone number. Just the scratch of her name at the very bottom in faded ink. Like she was afraid to sign it, but couldn't help herself. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, placed it on the nightstand, and stared at the ceiling until morning. I wish I could say I didn't feel anything. That her words bounced off me like they were nothing. But I did feel something. Not love. Not sadness. It was more like recognition. Like watching someone finally see the wreckage they left behind and realizing there's nothing left to save. But that's the thing about consequences. They're never on your schedule. They don't care when you're ready. Still, I couldn't sleep. That night, I made a choice. I got up, grabbed that old USB drive from the drawer, the one with the stories, the videos, and everything I hadn't dared to open in years, and plugged it into my laptop. I opened the folder labeled before. It was all there. The photos of us, the old audio notes I used to send her, even the voice memo where I read one of my short stories aloud because she said my voice made her feel safe. I hit play, but I didn't feel safe. I felt erased, and I realized she didn't just humiliate me that night on stage. She deleted me, and now, years later, she wanted to restore the file like it was that easy. But I'm not a file. I'm not hers to recover. I didn't sleep for 3 days after reading that letter. My thoughts were a carousel I couldn't escape. Same scenes, same feelings, spinning endlessly. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling fan, counting each slow rotation like it was some twisted form of meditation, but every thought led back to her. That damn video, the stage, the laughter, her voice echoing through a microphone as I stood frozen under lights, pretending I wasn't crumbling inside. And now she wanted to be heard, to be forgiven, to be seen as more than what she'd done. The audacity of it made my skin crawl. By the 4th day, I had talked myself into throwing the letter away. I stood over the trash can in the hotel room, held the page with 2 fingers like it was contaminated, and even felt the satisfying tension as I started to rip it. But I stopped halfway, not out of sentiment, out of strategy. I folded it again, slid it into the back of my notebook, the one filled with everything she never asked me about when we were married. I wasn't ready to let it go, not because I wanted her back, but because I needed to understand something that still haunted me, why I stayed with her for so long in the first place. That night, I went for a walk, no destination, just movement. It was nearly midnight when I passed a bookstore with its lights still on. Inside, a group was gathered in the corner, sitting in folding chairs, listening to a man in a sweater vest read aloud from a paperback. I should have kept walking, but something about the moment stopped me. The safety of it. The normalcy. I stood outside, hands in my coat pockets, listening through the glass. The man was reading a passage about grief, something poetic and quiet. A sentence caught me off guard. We do not mourn the dead. We mourn the empty space they leave behind. I don't know why, but I turned around and walked straight back to my hotel. Something in that sentence cracked the dam wide open. I opened my laptop and started writing, not in the notebook this time, but in a blank document. I wrote about her, about me, about the first time I felt invisible, the first time she joked about my voice, the first time she rolled her eyes when I cried at a movie. I wrote for 6 hours. By sunrise, I had written more in one night than I had in the past 3 years. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about finally seeing the whole picture, not just what she did to me, but what I allowed to be done. I was complicit in my own erasure, and it terrified me. Later that day, I went to a cafe I hadn't visited before, sat by the window, and ordered black coffee and nothing else. My mind was still spinning, but I felt lighter. I reached for my phone, and that's when I saw it. A notification, an unfamiliar number, one message, no greeting, just 6 words. You said without you. I'm shattered. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I didn't respond. Not yet. But the timing of it all, it wasn't random. She was still tracking me. Somehow. Maybe through that email account I thought was dead. Maybe through someone I'd passed. Maybe she never stopped. That realization hit harder than any memory. I hadn't vanished. I had just become a new obsession. I was no longer the man she mocked. Now, I was the man she couldn't forget. And that made her dangerous in a whole new way. The message stayed on my phone screen like a stain I couldn't scrub off. You said without you. I'm shattered. Shattered. As if that was some kind of reversal of the pain she caused me. As if her collapse on that bench somehow balanced the scale. For a long time, I just stared at those words. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it. I let it sit there, haunting me with the same quiet cruelty she used to wield like a scalpel. I realized then that Dana wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was chasing something else. Closure, maybe. Or the illusion that we were somehow still connected. She wanted me to acknowledge her pain, to validate it, to give her something. Anything. To prove that she hadn't ruined me completely. But here's the thing no one tells you about disappearing. You don't vanish once. You vanish in layers. First, from your surroundings. Then, from the lives of others. And finally, if you're not careful, from yourself. For a long time, I thought the hardest part was losing her. But I see now that the hardest part was trying to remember who I was before I became the punchline in someone else's life. That man, the one before the stage, before the video, before the forced laughter, he was soft-spoken. Yes, maybe even timid, but he had a core, a quiet spine. And Dana had shattered it long before I said those words. I spent the next few days walking. No music, no phone calls, just letting my feet carry me. The city felt different now, like I could see it clearly for the first time. People walked past me, busy with their lives, and for once I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like I was hiding. There was something powerful in being anonymous on your own terms. Not as a ghost, but as a man who had survived something brutal and lived to walk without chains. Then, on a Friday night, I found myself back at the bookstore where that man had been reading from his paperback. This time, it was empty, except for a young clerk behind the counter. She was sorting through a box of used donations. I walked over, asked if they took personal stories. She looked at me funny, shrugged, and said, "Depends. You a writer?" I hesitated. "Not really," I said. Then I corrected myself. "Actually, yeah, I think I am." I pulled a worn flash drive from my coat pocket, the one that had traveled with me through every motel, every bus ride, every night spent wondering if I still mattered. I handed it to her without ceremony. "There's a file on there," I said. "It's called Roasted. You can read it. Or not." She took it, uncertain but curious. I didn't explain what was inside. Not the raw, unfiltered breakdown of everything Dana had done, not the names or the aftermath or the reason I stopped speaking for months. I just left it in her hands and walked out. 2 hours later, as I sat on a park bench under a flickering street lamp, my phone buzzed again. Same number. Another message. I read it. All of it. "I didn't know you were in that much pain." But it wasn't Dana. It was the bookstore clerk. She had opened the file while I was still walking. She had read every word of my account. And somehow, without ever knowing me, she understood. That one message, from a complete stranger, did more for my healing than every apology Dana could ever write. It reminded me that what I went through wasn't small. It wasn't silly. And I wasn't overreacting. Pain that gets laughed at still hurts. Silence that follows betrayal is still loud. And sometimes, the people who destroy you don't deserve to witness your resurrection. I didn't reply to Dana again. Not after the bench. Not after her message. Not even when a new letter showed up weeks later with her handwriting shakier than before and a return address scrawled in the corner like an afterthought. I didn't open that one. I didn't need to. I had already said what needed to be said. 2 words that told her everything without giving her the satisfaction of a conversation. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. And I don't mean starting some glamorous new life or chasing dreams I'd buried. I mean small, real things. I got a room in a shared house with a creaky floor and peeling paint, but windows that faced the sunrise. I started a job at a small tech repair shop where no one cared what I'd been through. They just cared that I could fix broken things. There was something poetic in that, I guess. Fixing cracked screens and bent circuitry while quietly piecing myself back together, one morning at a time. And then, one afternoon, the clerk from the bookstore, the one who read my story, invited me to a local open mic night. I nearly said no, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. So I went. The place was tiny, filled with mismatched chairs and people who applauded even when the poems didn't rhyme. When she introduced me, I thought I might freeze. But then I saw one familiar face in the front row. Grant, the diner owner. Somehow, he'd made the drive. I still don't know how he found out. Maybe the universe doesn't care about logic when it comes to second chances. I stepped up to the mic and read a short piece, the one called Without You. There was no applause at first, just stillness. And then, someone clapped. Then another. And another. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just stood there, and for the first time, I wasn't the background character. I wasn't the punchline. I was the author. It didn't erase what happened. Nothing ever could. But it transformed it into something else, something useful, something true. I survived not because I was strong, but because I finally chose to stop carrying the weight of someone else's cruelty. And the moment I let go, I made space for something better to grow. So, if you're still reading this, thank you. And if someone's ever tried to reduce you to a joke, just know this. The punchline only works if you stay quiet. Speak. Write. Stand. Even if your voice shakes. Because healing doesn't look like revenge. It looks like peace. Thank you for being here on Reddit Confessions. Tell me, what moment from this story hit you the hardest? Was it the roast, the letter, or maybe the mic night? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know which part made you stop and think. And remember, sometimes the best thing you'll ever say is simply without you.